And if we actually replaced hormones, particularly estrogen and estriol, we'd actually reduce that risk. The Women's Health Initiative already showed that to be true. The women that were on estrogen alone had a 23% reduced risk compared to the group that did nothing of breast cancer. So the reality is hormones don't cause cancer. Toxins and bad lifestyle and a combination of 1,000 other things contribute to it.
Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and I am back again this week with another amazing suburban warrior here to share her story and expertise with us. Before we do that, I want to let you all know, for those of you that might be in your late 30s, 40s, you're starting to experience some new onset of health symptoms, you're not sure if you're in perimenopause or what is going on, I want you to know that I have a new free resource available to you guys. You can just go on suburbanwarriorpodcast.com, click on the From Pause to Power Menopause Roadmap. It is a comprehensive document that you guys can have for free that is really, it just has all the information there about what you might be experiencing and sort of how to navigate it. It's really all of the information I wish I had 10 years ago. Now it's at your fingertips, so check it out. So let me introduce to you this week my amazing guest who I can't wait to get into our conversation. This week I have on Dr. Betty Merry. She is revolutionizing women's health at the intersection of technology and personalized medicine. As the founder and CEO of the Minerva Project, she has created a groundbreaking digital health platform for women to address the healthcare crisis affecting women. The platform utilizes AI to personalize menopause management, integrating symptoms, wearable data, lab results, genetics, and hormone metabolism into a comprehensive care experience across America with telemedicine. With over 20 years of experience in functional medicine, Dr. Merry founded Living Well Dallas Functional Medicine Center, one of North Texas' largest multidisciplinary functional medicine practices, helping tens of thousands of people achieve optimum health. Her PhD research focused on hormone metabolism and the impact of the microbiome on women's health during midlife transitions. She has become a leading expert in hormone health, leading the charge to bring access to bioidentical hormones to women. A sought-after speaker and media personality, Dr. Merry has appeared on Fox News, NBC, and CBS, and shared the stage with health luminaries such as Dr. Mark Hyman and JJ Virgin. She hosts the Menopause Mastery podcast that is available anywhere you get your podcast platforms. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Merry.
Oh, gosh. Thank you for having me, Chrissy. I'm excited for this conversation.
I am as well, because it sounds like we are certainly moving the masses towards this new, getting out of this health crisis for women into education, knowledge, empowerment. I mean, that is what we're trying to do. And you have really created some revolutionary, platforms in order for women to really help empower themselves and live healthier lives. So first, before we get into all of them, because I can't wait to hear about it, tell us a little bit about you and sort of how you got into all this.
Yeah. So, I think the scary and sad part about sort of the integrative and functional medicine movement is 9 times out of 10, I'm kind of an OG. I've been in it for a long time. It's because somebody gets into it because they themselves or a family member got sick and they pulled out all of the access that they had and the tools that were available to them did not help. And so unfortunately we learned from our own health crises. And so for me, that was true. I actually had, two other careers before I sort of moved into this arena. Came out of college in the 80s in sort of sales and marketing. Got swept into the early technology boom in the 90s, right? So we're talking dial-up days. So all of us on this call, on this podcast, remember that.
Yes,
so,
yes.
And I have a very strong kind of analytical, scientific mind. So technical things are not hard for me. And so I just happened to understand the business and the tech. And so I got swept into that. So for 11 years, I worked for a company. I was the first woman hired into their IT department, ended up reporting to the chief technology officer. And I was responsible for how the company earned money, right? There was a much larger group
Pretty
of men.
Important.
Yeah, much larger group of men, but like if something broke in their world, it didn't affect the revenue. But literally, if something broke in my world, the cash registers couldn't ring. Like that
Right.
kind of. So I was working, 100 hours a week, getting paid half as much and twice as much responsibility. And at the time, that stress led to a lot of things. I'd started yoga and all this other stuff, but I'd had digestive problems that were episodic prior to that. And then they got really ramped up, and I ended up being diagnosed with colitis. And I asked in that appointment just one simple question that I thought was pretty evident, was could I change my diet and change the trajectory of this autoimmune digestive disorder, of which they give you these very, very immunosuppressive drugs, right? And I was fairly young at the time. And the doctor barked this laugh in my face, ha, 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 it has nothing to do with what you eat.
Wow.
And I was like, that's interesting. A 5-year-old would be able to tell you there has to be something about food that contributes to the health of your gut. And so, I was already doing things like meditation and yoga. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to take some nutrition classes, kind of figure this stuff out and see if I can help myself. And when I got into that, it was like, everything clicked. This is where I need to be, And so I started taking classes in a master's program and a CN program. Ended up, fixing my own gut and, went out and sort of did a side hustle. So many of us are probably people with a side hustle at some point, and opened my own private practice, working with people nutritionally, specifically around autoimmune conditions, which means I was like 9 out of 10 was a woman. And then I designed what I thought would be the next generation of healthcare with our clinic with a friend of mine. And, everything was moving along pretty well until I hit about 38, 39 years old. I'd had a tubal, right? Because I was having, crime scene periods, didn't want to be on the pill anymore because it made me just absolutely nutty, right? And everybody said, oh, it's fine. They're just going and cauterize the tubes. You'll be fine. I'm like, okay. Within about 6 months after that, my hair starts falling out. I get outbreak of acne here. I was already kind of a curvy girl. I'm not naturally thin. I'm curvy. 5 pounds on me looks like 20 on someone else.
Okay.
And you know what I mean?
I do. I'm 5 foot, so I know what 5 pounds looks like. Trust me.
Yeah, I tell people I'm 5'3", but I'm really like 5'2" and a half.
Exactly. I feel you. I know.
Yeah. And so I literally, over about 6 months, all this starts happening, evident of something going on. And I gained about 35 pounds. I'd been into bodybuilding, right? So I knew how to manipulate my body. And I was like, oh my God, the things that used to work for me are not working anymore. And I had access to all the functional medicine luminaries. Like I could call people, that the people that you read their books and everything. And I was told it was everything else. It's your adrenal fatigue. It's your thyroid. You're estrogen dominant. It can't be that. And basically I spent most of my 40s feeling terrible. And if anybody had come into our clinic and says, I want to see Betty for weight loss, I'd be like, yeah, obviously I don't know what's going on here, right? I literally wouldn't have the conversation. I'm like, I work with complex health problems. And so all of this prompted me to go back to get my PhD and ended up with another master's in the process. But I went back, and what I wanted to understand is specifically the impact of women's hormones, because we are not studied, right? Most of the studies were done on men. They intentionally leave women out because it makes it easy to understand. And particularly around how we package them to get rid of them, because there's a lot of inconsistencies in what we tell people about risks for cancer and all these other things. And so that's really where I dove in. And during that process, I, of course, became one of the world's experts really on hormone metabolism and its intersection, particularly with the microbiome. But I also was able to figure out how to drop 35 pounds, keep it off for 5 years, and I feel better at 55, going on 56, than I did at 40.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was because we blanket statement things to women when they've never been studied. And we tell women that whatever they're feeling is in their head. And the science that we do have is a lot of times parroted from somebody's belief that someone else picks up and runs with. And we're just missing that data, which is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. A lot of people my husband retired and people are like, you going to retire? I'm like, oh my God, I just got $250,000 of college debt that they gave me 30 years to pay off. What are you, crazy?
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm like, no, this is my this is my legacy, right? No.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I love that you said this whole blanket statement, everything for women, because, just like there was the blanket statement before, which I'm sure we can talk about with after the WHI study and how hormones were, it was a blanket statement of hormones cause cancer, period. So don't give any hormones to any women ever because it's going to cause cancer. And now, we are back on now, obviously we're trying to educate women that is not the case, and that, HRT is safe for most women, and all of the different hormones that we need to function in our bodies, right? It's not just our sex hormones. It's hormones in general. I mean, when you talk about the cascade of hormones that are working in our body, when we think about thyroid and adrenals and obviously estradiol and testosterone and progesterone, all of it, I think I get frustrated even working in this space because I go through, social media and everybody's selling with these blanket statements of this is what's right for you. And I think that's frustrating for women because every single person's body is different. So, what may work for me may not work for you. And it is a journey, right? You can't just slap an estradiol patch on you and be like, oh, I am healed. And I think in our Western medicine mentality, that is what we want. Everybody wants a magic pill. They want, okay, is this going to work? Is this going to make me feel better? Is this going to make me feel like myself again? And, it's a process and it's a journey. And I try when I work with my clients to so deeply get into that, you are your own person and you have your own health journey, and we're going to get there, but it's not just one thing. And I love how you said it's like these blanket statements that are available, because I feel like that's what women are sold. They're sold these blanket statements, even from people that mean well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, people are like, why are you a scientist? I'm obviously very logical, but I have a strong intuitive streak, and I trust my intuition. So women's intuition is really on. But if you were to line up 100 women, we all look different. Why?
Yeah.
Your sex hormones define your body shape. They define so much about you. So the idea that everybody would have this one version of hormone replacement to get them to optimal is complete and utter BS. I mean, it really, really is. And I appreciate the Menopause Society just saying, hey, we're trying to get it out there and let people know. But they're also perpetuating the story that, a low dose is going to work for everybody and protect the brain, the heart, the bones. And we know the data do not support that. The reality is every woman absorbs things differently. Every woman metabolizes, so how your body packages it to get rid of it at the liver differently. And that we lack in the research precision to understand, hey, Chrissy, where your dose needs to probably be is right here, not above this, not below this, right? We don't have that data truly. And we definitely can't individualize it. And we're doing a disservice because there's a lot of women, I can tell you, a patient story, but we have a lot of women that have come in with well-meaning practitioners that have put them on hormones and told them, hey, you're not getting hot flashes and night sweats. You feel pretty good overall. You're good, right? And they feel pretty good. They're lifting weights and they're, eating protein, doing all the things that we would tell them to do. Lo and behold, they've been on hormones for 8 years and they get a DEXA, which is a bone density test, and they've lost bone over those 8 years, which is hard to put back on. Can you do it? Yes, but it is hard because they were underdosed, because there wasn't precision to look at where they needed to be. And I think we have the capacity through genetics and laboratory data to understand each person as an N of one. Yeah. And that's where medicine is today. It does not need to go back to the 1900s where we just are like, hey, if we can get an antibiotic in people, they may not die from cholera, right? We are way beyond that. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating that women are still getting that message.
Yeah, no, I agree. Great. So tell us about your research. Tell us about what you do, about your research, how, you really look at women's bodies specifically to fine tune and, pinpoint this type of treatment. What's the research that you do?
Yeah. So we do a couple different things. So published research, my dissertation was looking at, we were specifically looking at women with IBS. So 3 of 4 people get diagnosed with IBS as a woman. 75% of women will have that diagnosis at some point, right? And it's important to understand IBS is a blanket statement for we have no earthly idea. We don't know the cause. No, I mean, it's a, pardon me, can I swear on here? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
It is a bullshit diagnosis. Because doctors go, oh my God, you have IBS. And I'm like, I could have told you that. My bowels are irritable. Thank you. That doesn't help me figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, and have been for years.
Right. I'm like, because I was always, because I had noticed I had colitis, so mine was a little different. It was, angry all the time. But, you could look and you'd be like, okay, mine gets worse around my period. Mine gets worse. I get more bloated. I get more this. I get more that. And it was clear that it was mostly female, and it seems to get worse, based on cycle activity. So it was probably some sort of sex hormone intersection. Okay. Well, there's not a lot of research looking at that. And what I was really interested in is when your body makes things, right? Every time it makes energy, every time your body does anything at the cellular level, there's trash and byproducts left behind, right? Yes. Those trash and byproducts head to the liver to get packaged up to get thrown away. And the same thing with every chemical, anything that we come in contact with has something that goes to the liver to get packaged and thrown away. And our genetics define how good we are at that, right? So, if somebody's listening today and they're like, oh my gosh, I am sensitive to everything. You walk into a building, they've got Scentsy candles or something, and you're like, oh my God, like that person has more compromised liver detoxification or biotransformation than Keith Richards. I always use Keith. I don't know him. I need to meet him because I want Keith Richards' genetics because he obviously can just get away with murder and never die.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. Yeah.
Right. So he obviously won the genetic lotto. I don't know that to be true, but you just, you can kind of do the visual.
We get it. Right. He's toxic loading and still hanging in there.
Yeah, like 80 something, like rocking out. Yes. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Right. So
meanwhile, people can walk into a room and the candle that is burning irritates them. They cannot handle a very high toxic load.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And our liver defines a lot of that. So So think of it this way: our liver goes through this like multi-step in order process, right? So I like to think of it as the body is going to wrap different colors of like wrapping paper around something, and they've got to go in order before your body can take it to the trash can, So it's also like the 3 little bears. I have the best pathway, a so-so pathway, and then a really bad pathway. And depending on how I'm wired genetically, I may be really good at packaging stuff through the cleanest pathway. And I may be really, another person may be really bad at that and really good at the more toxic pathway. Because one of the things that bothered me, whether it was IBS or just women's health in general, women do, a longer health span than a man, and I use the word suffer intentionally. We live an average of 4.5 years longer than men, but in poorer health, right? So dementia, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, all of the chronic diseases we actually suffer from longer, right? And hormones have to play a role in that. And then I was looking at it and said, the liver's got to be part of this pathway. And so we have this packaging activity, and like the 3 little bears, it has to go in order and has to ideally go down the best pathways. As we do that, we need nutrients to do that, right? So the things that you've heard that are cancer protective, like broccoli sprouts and brassica family and citrus bioflavonoids, curcumin, the reason why they are healthy for you is they actually amplify and help these pathways clear stuff out, right? So when we are women cycling, we not only have, pesticides, herbicides, plasticizers, phthalates, all the junk we put on our body. We have our hormones going through those pathways. Other medications like antidepressants go through those pathways, and they can become overwhelmed, right? And so I was looking at that as like, are these pathways part of the problem with some of these disease states? And specifically, I looked in IBS because there's a big gap in the literature, because that's what you have to look for as a PhD candidate. And so what we were looking at is when you package this stuff for the trash, a bunch of it goes into the gut, right? So it's in the stool. And we have microbes, we have bacteria that produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. And what that enzyme allows them to do is take the final wrapper off of some of those estrogenic toxins and allow your body to recirculate it into the blood, right? What's interesting is as we go through menopause, those bacteria increase in numbers.
Wow.
And you think about it and you go, why? Why would they increase in numbers naturally as for the loss of estrogen? And it's because it's your body's attempted reserve at preserving whatever estrogen you have. It's just not designed to handle all the toxins going through there that look like it.
Yeah.
And so we were looking at that interaction to see, is it greater or less in women with IBS? And we found for sure in constipation dominant IBS that women had higher levels of this bacterial activity. And so this opened the door to a lot of things, because the other things that never worked for me scientifically, and so I'm going to give the example so everybody can kind of understand that, is in women, if you have a longer menstrual kind of timeline, so you start your periods earlier, you last longer, you are protected against breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, which are all estrogen sensitive.
And when you say start earlier, last longer, you mean like age? Like if you started at like 10, yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and you last to like 56, whereas I started at 11 and I was done by 47, shorter time.
Yeah, same.
Right. If you have more babies, the more babies you have, if you knock out 12 babies, your risk for breast cancer is very low compared to me, who's never had children.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yes.
And so then I was like, okay, so if those two things are true, that means that you had periods of time, the more children you have, with very, 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 very high hormones, right? They're astronomically high when you're pregnant. Right. I was like, well, then how is it that that's protective, but something magical happens when you're 50 and hormones will kill you? Like, logic. Yeah. Like, if it doesn't sound logical to you, that means there's a lie in there. There's a myth that's being perpetuated. So I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense. And why do we have our risk for breast cancer as women goes up radically at menopause, right? Yeah. And so all women around menopausal age, 50 to 60, have about a 4 in 1,000 chance for breast cancer.
Wow.
So, and then when you get to about 80, it goes to 1 in 8. And some of that's the aging. Aging in itself is probably the greatest disease process, right?
Right.
But the reality is that when we're cycling, we actually have a reduced risk. And so I was like, okay, so birth control's okay until you're magically menopausal. Your hormones are okay until you're magically menopausal, but our risk for cancer goes up. So it can't be our own natural hormones. It can't be, because we aren't making them. We can test them. They're almost non-existent. Your fat cells make a little bit of estrogen, but not enough to be protective, and not the one that is protective. Right. And so for me, I was like, what else is going on? So if I have plastics and herbicides and pesticides and all these other things that I'm getting exposed to all the time, and I don't have my own estrogen in there, what is it doing? A, it's going to the liver, may or may not be detoxified. And B, what is it allowed to do at that point? Well, for a hormone to do its job, it has to have a receptor, right? So think of that as a keyhole. So my hormone's the key. I got to have the receptor. The key's got to go in there. If I don't have my natural estrogen, what is hitting your estrogen receptors? The plastics, the herbicides, the pesticides, all of that. And it is my hypothesis right now that most of the risk for cancers and other things that we see postmenopausally is because those toxins are hitting those receptors, and we don't have our protective estrogen, estradiol, and estriol on board to occupy them. And if we actually replaced hormones, particularly estrogen and estriol, we'd actually reduce that risk. And the reality is the Women's Health Initiative already showed that to be true. The women that were on estrogen alone had a 23% reduced risk compared to the group that did nothing of breast cancer. Yeah. So the reality is hormones don't cause cancer. Toxins and bad lifestyle and a combination of 1,000 other things contribute to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was fascinating to me. I loved that explanation, and just thinking about the liver and how we package things up and how we get rid of our toxins. So I'm curious. So thank you for explaining all that.
Sure.
And in a very, in a very easy way for us.
Oh, good. It's not an easy topic.
It's not. It's not at all. So I appreciate the way you explained it. Let's talk a little bit about the intersection of gut health and hormones, because like we're talking about IBS and how all of the hormones affect the gut health, because I feel like so many women, like sort of like their first sort of symptom in their 30s, especially these days, is gut health in one way or another, whether it's IBS, a colitis, just constant bloating, gas, like you name it. I feel like it's a lot of times it's gut health, before the hot flashes, before the sleep disturbances, before the intolerance to alcohol, like all of these things. I feel like, and I think that's part of the reason why a lot of women don't associate it as perimenopause, because it's in their gut. And so talk to us a little bit about this intersection between gut health and hormones.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is you cannot be healthy with an unhealthy gut. Just
Right
period.
on.
That's a full stop.
Period.
Just period. Like if your gut is truly unhealthy, right? You are going to every body system from your brain. If you have a leaky gut, you have a leaky blood-brain barrier. If you have inflammatory gut activities, you have inflammatory metabolic activities that increase your risk for diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Right? Even poor gut health affects bone turnover and osteoporosis risk. Right? So the reality is our gut is ground zero. And we have microbes in there. We have about 2 to 4 pounds of bacteria in our gut. We have more bacterial cells in our body than we do human. And they have to be there, right? And it's like a jungle. So if we have a really healthy jungle, we haven't had a lot of antibiotics, we were breastfed, we were vaginal delivered, we eat a variety of foods, we make sure that we eat fermented foods, we probably will end up with a better gut. But what we know is most of that groundwork is done by about 5 years old, and then it's sort of a downhill slope from there. So a lot of what that sucks. I know, I read that and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what the research is kind of pointing to, is that we sort of think of it as we created the garden, right? And we sort of created the rainforest. And at that point, it's just like, can you get enough animals in there? Because the reality is you want a lot of animals and you want a lot of variety.
Okay.
But there's a lot of things that we can do that mess that up. Chronic dieting, taking out food groups, taking antibiotics or other things, and exposure to toxins. Those toxins, kill off our bacteria too. Our bacteria are also very subject to our stress, right? They don't function. And then the gut function itself, like how well your motor runs in the gut, is very subjective to your stress level. So a lot of times if we're stressed out and we eat lunch, we have gut pain later on. I'm like, because you couldn't digest, because it needs rest. It needs the rest signal to digest.
Yeah.
But when we look at hormones, because our bacteria affect the hormones that are available, we have receptors for those hormones in the gut, and we don't really understand what they're up to. Our microbes can metabolize other things like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, which are calming neurotransmitters. There's a huge intersection there. And so, we always look at it from a functional medicine standpoint that we start with the gut. So if the gut's not working, we work on that. Now, I don't believe, personally, there's a lot of people out in the functional medicine community that'll go, oh, you got to earn your hormones. So you got to get your gut dialed in first. You got to start exercising and sleeping. I'm like, no, we put the hormones in, but we fix your gut, we fix your sleep, we fix your exercise.
Yeah, sort of simultaneously. So as
sometimes
you're healing your gut, hopefully putting the hormones in helps to heal the gut maybe a little faster. Along the way.
Well, yeah. And the reality is we also, as women, I mean, I think the first time I probably went on a diet, I was around 12, the diet culture is so bad in women's lives. And we have done so many crazy things at this point, because everywhere you turn, there's the latest crazy diet, extreme diet. And the reality is every bit of our gut health resources and research shows we need a wide variety of food. We need lots of plant food. Doesn't mean that we can't eat animal protein, because it's actually valid, but we don't just do animal protein. Just because you can survive on it doesn't make it good. And that we need that wide variety of foods to feed these microbes. And when we can't do them, like people that might have, bloating and things like that because they have bacterial overgrowth in the wrong neighborhood, all those things, that's a sign something's wrong. It doesn't mean you can't eat those foods anymore. It means you need to fix it.
Exactly.
And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think that is really the challenge. I know, just for me personally, I had definitely had some major GI issues, and I did the whole elimination thing. I was gluten-free for a very long time. Dairy-free. At one point, I had to go vegan. Like all of these things, the elimination. This is part of my perimenopausal journey, but it was all part of sort of fixing my gut along the way. And now I can eat everything, but I think taking the gluten out of my diet for a pretty long period of time and then getting back into it, I can eat it now, but I couldn't for a long time because my gut was just in such disrepair and, the SIBO and this and that and like all these things. But it was a journey. It was a process in order to fix it. But I am such on the other page now where I think it's so important to have variety in our diets to get the most nutrient dense diets. And like you said, I mean, just eating all the phytonutrients we can from fruits and vegetables, and then obviously putting in the proteins and, whether you eat animal protein or not. I'd love to know from a nutrition standpoint, since we're talking protein, what is your take on protein powders?
So I use protein powders when somebody is struggling to get enough protein in their diet.
Yeah.
I was a bodybuilder, right? So I had on average 2 protein shakes a day and I ate eggs all the time.
Yeah.
And I have an aversion to chicken breasts, protein powder drinks, and eggs, just because because I was trying to get like 150 to 200 grams of protein a day. And so like that was just every day. If
So
I have
much.
to be starving to death to get a shake in, I'm just going to be honest. It's the personal aversion, but I have a lot of people that love it because they're like, I like making a smoothie. I think protein powders can augment what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
They can help you get more protein in a smaller volume of food.
Yes.
But I don't want people to use that as their primary driver to get 100 to 120 grams of protein in.
Yeah.
Now I do have people that are vegetarian. I don't require people eat animal proteins, just as animal proteins have the complete amino acid profile and particularly the leucine levels to drive muscle protein making synthesis, right? Make muscle.
Yeah.
Better than vegan forms. But you can do it, right? But I think they augment, but it's not the panacea. And if the goal for somebody is to build muscle, which every woman should be on that route, the more muscle we have, that's the biggest measure of longevity is more muscle mass.
Yes.
Right? And so if that's the case, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like just like you were talking about gut health being ground zero, like muscle growth is like the key to our metabolic health, right? Like making sure that we have muscle for the years to come. Yeah, and it's hard. It's not easy to be putting all this muscle on. I mean, it gets harder and harder as we age.
Yeah, and we're losing it by nature. The loss of hormones are going to drive the loss of muscle mass. So, so one of the big studies that came out in 2023 was looking at how you divvy up your protein throughout the day and how much gets used to make muscle. Because the reality is your body can take protein and make glucose out of it in the liver. And that ramps up when you're in perimenopause and menopause. So what that means is the woman, so I hear this all the time, Betty, I'm getting my protein in, I'm doing 120 grams. And I'm like, with what? They're like, well, I don't always get my other stuff. That means they choked down a chicken breast and they didn't get anything else with it. And they're like, I've been doing it for a year and I can't lose weight. And I'm like, well, that's because your body is taking every bit of your protein and making sugar out of it instead of burning fat. Right. And your microbiome is dying.
Yeah.
So the reality is the research shows that it is better to get a larger chunk of protein as the first meal that breaks a fast and a larger chunk at the nighttime meal. So what that also means is if you're one of those people that's like, I have a little bit of a smoothie and then I have a little protein bar and then I eat a little at my lunch and I get like 10 gram, I'm not going to make as much muscle as if I got 50 at breakfast and 50 at dinner and whatever else I get in the middle. Yeah.
Okay, that's really important. Yeah. That's really important to know. Right? Because a lot of people are grazers. A lot of women, especially, our stomachs aren't that big. You can't really eat as much. So a lot of times people do graze throughout the day. And I think that's really an important point. So that getting it in your first morning meal and at the end of the day is benefiting you a lot more than getting it if you eat it all throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, we had to retool all of our recommendations in our clinic based on that research because I was like, everything we had ever talked about prior to that was, a little bit, 3 times a day and a snack once or twice. I'm like, no, if our goal is to be able to use it to make muscle, and especially if I have women trying to lift weights and things like that, so that means you have to get a bunch in that breakfast meal. So a lot of times I will use protein powder and collagen. Collagen isn't a complete protein. It doesn't count, but it counts towards total intake, right? Okay. But you can't build muscle off of collagen. I don't care how much you try and down. It's not going to build muscle. But we might put protein powder, collagen powder into, a milk base. And I routinely will put it in cottage cheese and then
Yeah.
blend it in the blender and make it thick, because then I can get
Yeah.
50 grams all at once.
Yeah.
Because I'm
Yeah.
lazy. I'm
No,
just
that's
inherently
great.
lazy. You know?
Well, and to your point, it's just harder to get to eat that much food.
Yeah.
You know,
I can't eat the volume.
right? It's the volume, and all while trying to eat the fruits and the vegetables and salads and all these other things that are so wonderfully good for us. But you can only eat so much in a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so talk to me now a little bit about thyroid health and like perimenopause and menopause and all these things that happen. Because I feel like, again, so many women are told, in addition to just autoimmune disease in general, but like have thyroid disorders, or they get diagnosed with a Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism in perimenopause. So
Yes.
what do you think this intersection is between these hormones?
Yeah, so we have to remember that our hormones, basically our sex hormones, testosterone, progesterone, are calming to the immune system, right? So they help balance the immune system. Estrogen, balanced to testosterone and progesterone, also is calming. However, when we get into perimenopause, by nature, unless you're intervening with things like progesterone, you are in an estrogen dominant state because you're not ovulating consistently anymore. You're still having a period. You still get to have that, but you're not really ovulating. And so what happens is our immune system is overly stimulated, is overly kind of dramatized. Think of it that way. It's kind of being bitchy, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And what it does is it looks for things to take it out on. And your endocrine system, so your thyroid, your adrenals that answer stress, your sex hormones, and even your pancreas and insulin function, they are a symphony and they all work together. And so if you have one area that is playing out of balance, right? Somebody's playing jazz when they're supposed to be playing a waltz. All the other hormone systems are going to try and balance it, right? So if we're in perimenopause, we are going to have dysregulation of adrenal function. We're going to have dysregulation of thyroid function. So a lot of women are walking around with subclinical hypothyroid, meaning they can't make enough of the active thyroid hormone T3, but everything else looks normal because the brain doesn't realize there's a problem. And we'll also get well-meaning practitioners that might put them on thyroid medication and a bunch of other stuff, but if they don't address the other hormones, they don't get better. That's a lot of what I ran into. I've been on every thyroid medication dose or whatever, and I do have thyroid issues. I have to take some, but I was like, not helping, don't feel any different.
Right. So your thyroid medication that you were being given wasn't helping because of you weren't helping with all the other supplementing with all the other like sex hormones, estradiol, progesterone, testosterone. Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, that's actually really important to know because I think, again, a lot of women get put on synthetic thyroid and then don't really feel that much better. But their blood levels.
I was put on NP thyroid. I was on compounded T3. I was on progesterone, but I still wasn't feeling well. And a lot of it was because, yes, I had been. So here's the other thing that people hear a lot in this world. You're estrogen dominant. And so they'll go into the very end of their menopause saying, I can't have estrogen because I was estrogen dominant. Right. And here's the reality. That's not true.
Well, what does that even, like, explain to us lay people and my listeners.
Yeah.
If someone tells you you're estrogen dominant, what does that even mean?
Yeah, so your body produces estrogen, right? And some people produce more than others, right? So if you are a curvy girl, right? I'm a curvy girl. I thank J-Lo every day because I was never going to have a tiny butt. I've always had a lot of butt, right? And a lot of everything.
Love it.
Right? And so generally speaking, if you're curvy, you have a pretty robust level of estrogen. But if you're long and willowy, no, you probably don't, right?
Okay.
Probably you're a little more androgen balanced, a little more testosterone balanced. As we go into our 40s, because progesterone is already declining, and it's because our egg carton is running out, and we don't always pop the egg out, and the egg must pop out for you to make progesterone, right? If the egg doesn't come out of the little, egg carton in your ovary, progesterone doesn't get made. And that's happening in our 40s anyway. So the relative relationship between your estrogen and your progesterone is out of balance, which would make you estrogen dominant, right?
Yeah.
But here's the other really important thing, and nobody talks about this. If I'm estrogen dominant, how many keyholes would I have for estrogen in my body? Because it's a full body effect. Every single cell except for 2 cells in your body have estrogen receptors. I'm going to have a ton of keyholes. right?
Yeah.
Compared to the long, willowy person. Like I have a nutritionist in my office who's 6'2". She doesn't have near the amount of estrogen I do.
Right, right.
Right? I have a lot of keyholes for it because my body was ready for it. So when I lose that estrogen as I go into the menopause transition, which can be 8 to 14 years, my receptors are screaming for it.
Yeah.
So what do you think your body does? We used to believe that the receptors died off. That was dogma. That we had no science to say that. And if you hear somebody say it, they don't know anything about the science. Because Mosconi's group out of the Weill Center in New York showed for the first time in the brain, when a woman goes through menopause, we increase the number of receptors to try and grab whatever estrogen is circulating, not decrease.
Yeah. Right.
So logic hold true. If I make a little more estrogen than somebody else, I'm going to have more receptors, and my body's going to make more receptors as it starts to decline. So I'm probably going to more profoundly feel that loss. So the reality is almost all women will experience some level of dominance if they aren't taking progesterone and sort of balancing what's happening in the perimenopause transition. But even if I was a little bit estrogen dominant, that doesn't mean I can't take estrogen. And it may actually be more profound that I need it earlier than I think I do. And for me, that was a big part of what I learned digging through the research. I was like, oh crap, I should have been on estrogen years ago. Because just because you have a period doesn't mean your estrogen's high enough to do anything. It's just enough to bring on the period.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another big myth out there, that if you are still cycling and getting a period, you're not in menopause. I'm using all these air quotes, but that you don't need hormone replacement, or you may not, and that you should just suffer through it until you're done. And then, but then it's actually almost a little too late. I mean, I feel like, especially when we were talking about bone regrowth and, trying to minimize losing our muscle mass, bone, like all of these things, I feel like the earlier, the better.
Yeah, the research really does show that, because particularly the research around the brain and the bones, right? And cardiovascular research, but we don't have as much of that, but we do have it, that a lot of the damage, the acceleration of aging happens in the kind of throes of that perimenopause transition. Towards the end, it accelerates. So if I'm going to replace, I want to replace before I go all the way into menopause if I can, because that means the brain in a woman going through menopause shrinks and moves a bunch of superhighways away from the memory centers. That's why it's hard to remember things. And by about 10 years out, it's done that remodeling. And it's actually moving to creative centers. So it's not like we're atrophying, but it's moving to creative centers.
Oh, that's good news.
yeah. And so, because people go, oh my God. But I'm like, that's why you can't remember anything. Right?
Yes.
But the reality is, if I intervene before that remodeling process happens, it doesn't happen, right? We don't lose those connections. So if I start then, great. That's the most opportune window. However, if I'm a woman and I'm 63 and I'm really, I'm taking care of myself, I'm doing the good stuff, I can still do hormones, right? Every woman on the planet, including those who have had breast cancer in their family history of breast cancer, deserves to be looked at individually and see if hormones right for them. Because even family history of breast cancer is not, even in conventional medicine standards, a contraindication for hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah. And that's a very important message for people to hear.
Yeah. And even women who had breast cancer. We have women that had breast cancer. Once they're done with all of the kind of treatment, their oncology wants them to. We have a lot of women that are on therapy doing great, 10 years out and doing great. It doesn't mean you can't do it.
So tell us about your telemedicine clinic, because it is something that services all of America, which is pretty amazing. So obviously you have virtual appointments.
Yep.
And so tell us what you do, because I think that there are a lot of women out there who are having symptoms, are not getting the relief that they need from their physicians, and quite frankly, really are just so frustrated because they have nowhere to turn. So tell us about your telemedicine clinic.
Yeah, so so it's called the Minerva Project. So Minerva, just if anybody doesn't know who that is, she is the goddess of science, medicine, and war. And she was born fully grown from the head of Jupiter, right? So I've always had a special love for her. And so,
love it.
And so, so what this was really born out of people coming to my clinic. We have people that fly in, from other states, because they just couldn't find somebody that had that right kind of mindset. So we wanted to provide access, right, to women. And today we can do so much of what is needed in medicine virtually through video visits. And what we do, we take it a lot further. There are companies out there that provide hormone therapy, but they kind of just say, if you feel better and you're not having a hot flash, then you're probably okay. But the data really shows that in at least 30 to 35% of women, just dosing on sort of hot flash sort of symptomology means that they will be underdosed. So they're taking something, but they're not getting the protection to the brain, the heart, the bones. And in some cases, people can get overdosed because we don't know. Our absorption of things is very, very different. And so we do lab work, right? So we start actually with lab work. We also want to know how metabolically healthy somebody is, right? Like, how's the blood sugar? What's the insulin like? And then we start with that. So we start with labs, and then you meet with one of our functional people that helps you sort of address, like, let's look at the gut and make sure everything's okay. And then you meet with your prescriber that's licensed in your state to actually provide the prescriptions. And then periodically, about every 3 months, we do labs again to kind of look and make sure that your symptoms get better, but we have a therapeutic dose. Yeah. And then once we hit that, we actually do a hormone metabolism test, which is a urine test that looks at those liver pathways to see how are you packaging it to get rid of it. Because we can manipulate that with diet and nutrition. And then usually by that point, someone's feeling really, really good. We've, dialed in all of that, all the symptoms are better, but then we also know that we're at a therapeutic range that we now have ideal outcomes. And then from there, we do labs after the first year, we do them at least every 6 months. We're required to do that by law, to continue, particularly testosterone dosing, because we actually do provide testosterone across the U.S. A lot of your other companies do not. We actually have a relationship where we send you somewhere to get a physical so we can accommodate the requirements for testosterone. And so that's what we do, because I felt like what was available out there was either clinicians that don't know anything, because I think it's important for people to know that gynecologists and OB-GYNs get less than 3 hours of training on menopause. It's like 30% have been trained only 3 hours on menopause. They are surgeons. They are not hormone specialists. They are surgeons. Right. They're there to cut stuff. And endocrinology get no training on sex hormones at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. Which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. You have to know the insides. That's the problem, is the average person doesn't know the insides of medicine. They don't know how messed up it really is.
I know. Believe me, I know. I mean, yes, I agree. And I was in it, and I feel like, how did I not see it so clearly, that how just messed up it is? But it's unfortunate until you really are on the other side of it and experiencing it as the patient, then you're like, this is effed up.
Totally.
I mean, It's just really, you just, it all of a sudden becomes very clear. So it's a shame. It's just really a shame that we rely so heavily on our medical system, and we really have to start looking at it from a whole different perspective. Acute medicine, things that surgery, to your point, things that you need acutely, but for chronic conditions that we are experiencing a health crisis in this country between autoimmunity and, women's health and, diseases of inflammatory causes, doctors are not helping you.
No, and it's funny because, there's a lot of people and I'm grateful, a lot of people really well known on social media that are getting the message out there that basically hit the wall when they got to perimenopause. And what I'm so excited about is we never paid attention to the Women's Health Initiative. We looked at the data and we're like, this is the most crappy done design ever. We're not paying attention to that. So we've been doing this for 20 years. So I have tens of thousands of patients' data, laboratory outcomes, all this other stuff where we can see metabolic improvements. Not only our population numbers of like breast cancer compared to the healthiest of Western medicine is fractional. And so we have the data already because we've been doing it for 20 years to go, okay, we actually have a good idea. And then the digital platform we're building is actually going to provide scientific rigor for women's health. And we're going to be separated from pharma, big medicine, and NIH, right? Completely devoid of those individuals so we can maintain scientific integrity because that's missing in today's world.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, Dr. Betty, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I feel like I have learned so much. I love what you're doing. I love that you've been doing it for so long. I love that you looked at the research of the WHI and you're like, nope, not good. See ya. You guys go this way, we're going that way. Because here we are. And that's really what we need. And we need pioneers like you and people that are really revolutionizing the women's healthcare system. And I just love that you offer this amazing platform for women to have as a resource for their health, because it is so necessary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. This is the hill I'm dying on.
I think it's a great one. I think it's a great one. So obviously we will link all of your information in the show notes. People can find your Instagram. You're at Dr. Betty Mary, same as Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, but we'll link it all in the show notes so people can find you. And guys, if you want to learn more about Dr. Betty Mary and her telemedicine, the Minerva Project, please be sure to check it out. Follow her along on Instagram. And remember, you can follow me at Suburban Warrior on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and of course, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We would love to hear what you think about this episode. So drop us a comment, tell us what you think. And remember, we are here building this community so that we can redefine midlife wellness with grit and grace. We'll be back next week with another amazing Suburban Warrior here to share her story with you. Till then, see you guys.